Sylvester Stallone had to sell the most precious thing he had, his dog, just to eat, because before becoming an action movie legend, he lost everything. He had no money, no job, and hit rock bottom to the point where his only option was to let go of his one true companion to survive. All he had left was an idea he'd been working on for years. The story of a man beaten down by life who turns into a boxer and takes on the greatest champion of all time. He wrote a script with the plan to turn it into a movie and star in it, then pitched it to several producers. They all loved the story, but they didn't want him as the lead. They offered up to $300,000 for the script, and even though he was living in poverty, Sylvester refused to sell it. Sylvester Gardenzio Stallone was born in July 1946 in New York. His dad picked that name to honor his own father, Sylvester Stallone, an Italian immigrant who tweaked it a bit when he arrived in the U.S. to sound more American. His entry into the world wasn't easy. During delivery, doctors had to use forceps, a tool placed on either side of a baby's head to guide them out and ease the process. But one maneuver went wrong and caused permanent nerve damage to his face. If you've seen photos or movies of Sylvester, you've probably noticed that signature expression, especially on his lower lip. Well, that's something he's had since birth. While it would challenge him later in life, for now, he was just a baby growing up with his parents in Hell's Kitchen, one of New York's roughest neighborhoods. His mom, Jackie, worked as a chorus girl at a nightclub called Billy Rose's Diamond Horseshoe. His dad, Frank, was a U.S. Army cavalry veteran. With money tight, Frank worked as a barber, and they sent Sylvester to a boarding house during the week while constant arguments filled their home. When his brother Frank was born and they moved to a better suburb, the fights only got worse. At school, Sylvester struggled to fit in and had a speech disorder that made it tough to connect. To escape his reality, the movies became his safe haven. He'd spend hours in front of the screen, forgetting everything and dreaming of being a hero like the ones on film. Back home, he'd stand in front of the mirror, mimicking gestures and reciting lines. Years later, he'd say one of his favorite characters was Hercules, especially in the 1958 version with Steve Reeves, a bodybuilder with an imposing physique. That image of a strong hero stuck with him and became his role model. Over time, his parents' relationship completely fell apart, ending in divorce. Though they went their separate ways, they split custody. His mom moved to Philadelphia and opened a women's gym, while his dad settled in a rural area in a house with few comforts. Frank spent more time with their mom, and Sylvester stayed with his dad, who, to Sylvester's misfortune, started turning violent. To make ends meet, his dad took a job as a maintenance worker at a polo club, and both Sylvester and his father began caring for horses. Over time, horses became Sylvester's big passion, and he started playing polo. He improved so quickly that he qualified for nationals, but according to him, his dad never felt proud of his achievements. To give you a sense of their relationship, Sylvester shared a memory he could never forget. During a polo match, his dad stormed down from the stands, grabbed him by the neck, and threw him to the ground in front of everyone. So from that day on, Sylvester never played polo again. Keep that scene in mind because later on, he'd do something similar, but in front of lots of cameras. As he grew, the kid started having behavior issues at school, leading to him being sent to a military academy. There, he got help with his speech problem and started turning his life around. Looking back now, and as he said himself, it feels like his acting out was just a reflection of the frustration and toxic environment he lived in with his dad. After finishing high school, he earned a scholarship to study at a university in Switzerland, where acting began to feel like a real possibility. With more maturity, he took seriously the idea of expressing himself through characters and joined a theater workshop where Luigi helped him understand the craft, starring in the play Death of a Salesman. It was in that performance that he found what he wanted to do for the rest of his life. Because of that, when he returned to the U.S., he enrolled in improv classes. During this time, he met John Hertzfeld, with whom he shared a love for film and all it entailed. They grew close, and after college, they moved to New York together to break into the movie industry. But life for someone chasing an art career isn't easy, and Sylvester had to figure out how to survive with little financial support from his parents. To get by, he worked as a lion feeder at a zoo and an usher at a theater. He slept wherever he could and adopted Butkus, a sweet bull mastiff with a noble gaze who became his only real companion, a creature that didn't judge him for what he lacked and gave him unconditional love. Meanwhile, he auditioned for every role he could, but at each casting, they told him he spoke funny, had droopy eyes, or didn't fit the image they wanted. Harsh words for someone dreaming of that world. To understand why he faced so much rejection, you have to look at the context he was trying to break into as an actor. For a long time, Hollywood stuck to the same formula: attractive leads with flawless morals who always triumphed in the end. Movies like Ben-Hur or The Prince of Pirates reflected the kind of strong heroes audiences wanted to see. But in the 1970s, a new wave of filmmakers tired of that mold emerged, seeking more realistic stories, giving Sylvester a chance. In the meantime, he kept living his life, working, falling for a photographer named Sasha, and spending weekends with John writing together. During one of those writing sessions, a character named Rocky was born. Though it was just a loose idea for now, it was already in his head. The guys tried making their first independent film, a silent one about horses where they put their skills to use, since they couldn't afford sound recording. But despite shooting a lot of material, they never finished or released it. After that, Sylvester managed to connect with director Woody Allen, who was looking for extras for Bananas. At first, Allen turned him down, saying he didn't see him as intimidating, but this time Sylvester didn't take no for an answer. He later shared in an interview that to convince him, he dressed like a thug and intimidated the director, which ultimately worked and landed him the role. It was a small part with little screen time, but it officially marked his entry into the film world. Thanks to that, he got a role in a 1950s set movie about a group of tough guys from Brooklyn, Lords of Flatbush. The story follows a gang of friends, aimless kids with inner conflicts, caught between rebellion and social pressure. When he started filming his scenes, he wasn't happy with the script, so he began improvising, rewriting his lines, trying new attitudes, and pouring a lot of himself into the role. That process of tweaking the script while acting gave him experience in understanding how a story works from the inside, and how to shape a character to make it more authentic and powerful, a skill he'd use in all his films, both as an actor and director. The problem? That role also typecast him. From then on, they kept offering him the same character over and over, a stereotype that gave him work, but also shut the door on more complex roles or leads. So he realized that if he wanted to break free from always playing the same part or land a lead role, he'd have to write his own story. With the roughly $1,300 he earned from the movie, he married Sasha. Then he packed a suitcase, grabbed his dog, and together they traveled 11 days to Hollywood in search of different roles and new opportunities. Settled in a humble place with no resources, Sylvester looked for work in the industry, but when he couldn't find any, the situation turned desperate. His wife got pregnant, and neither they nor their dog had food. So he reached a point where his only option was to sell his only companion. Butkus was sold for $60 so at least someone could feed him, and Sylvester could eat and chase his dream, one of the toughest moments of his life. With a lot of effort, he landed small roles, mostly as a gangster or thief, not what he really wanted, but enough to scrape by with his wife. This tough period started to shift when he got a part on the series Kojak, acting alongside big Hollywood names, which gave him a boost. After that, he kept taking roles while simultaneously developing the character he had in mind. At first, Sylvester had envisioned Rocky as a brutal, violent, and complex guy, but with all he'd been through, he decided to take it in a new direction that would change everything. He chose to make it the story of a vulnerable, insecure man, almost a mirror of himself. Once he had that foundation, he looked for a twist to make the story more compelling and found it by turning him into a boxer. That's how an emotional, epic tale was born, featuring a character people could relate to. Once he had it, he started pitching the idea to producers who saw potential in the project, so Sylvester locked himself away for 3 days to write the first draft. When he showed it to them, the producers were blown away but suggested famous actors for the role, since recognizable faces had more experience and were easier to market. Sylvester insisted the only way to make the movie was with him as the lead, but they offered up to $300,000 for the script on the condition he wouldn't act. The money was tempting. It would have solved many of his financial struggles and those to come, especially since he was about to become a dad. It was a tough call, but he stood firm and didn't sell. Years later, he explained he turned down the cash because he knew it was his one real shot to break into Hollywood big time and escape the typecasting of secondary bad guy roles. He felt that if he sold it, he'd regret it for life. So determined was he, and so good was the script, that the producers had no choice but to agree just to not miss out. They assigned him a director and gave him about $1 million budget. That might sound like a lot, but it's modest compared to other films of that era, like King Kong, which came out in 1976 with a $23 million budget, and they had to get it done fast. As Sylvester's life started to turn around and filming was about to begin, he decided to get Butkus back. But the guy he sold him to asked for $3,000 to return him, a sum Sylvester didn't have. Luckily, they struck a deal. The man would give Butkus back in exchange for a small role in Rocky. And if you're wondering which scene, it's the one where a guy tells Rocky he should take a break. That guy was the one who once owned Butkus. With his dog back, the birth of his first son, whom he named Sage, and a strong drive to make the best movie of his life, Sylvester kicked off the casting process. Rather than sticking to technical criteria, he looked for people he connected with and who shared his vision for the story. You've probably seen this movie, but if not, here's what it's about. Rocky Balboa is an amateur boxer from Philadelphia living alone in a small apartment. He's got no big opportunities or clear direction. At 30 years old, he works as a debt collector for a loan shark, and though he still trains occasionally, his career seems stalled. Everything changes when Apollo Creed, the world heavyweight champion, loses his opponent for an upcoming fight. As a publicity stunt, he picks an unknown boxer and chooses Rocky just because he likes his nickname, the Italian Stallion. Rocky takes the chance, knowing it's a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. He starts training with Mickey, an old coach who always believed in his potential, and begins a relationship with Adrian, a shy young woman working at a pet store, forming a genuine bond. As he preps for the fight, Rocky trains with everything he's got, even punching meat in a freezer. On fight day, Apollo doesn't expect much resistance, but Rocky withstands the blows, falls, gets back up, and pushes him to the limit. In the end, Rocky loses by split decision, but that doesn't matter anymore. To the people who came to watch, he's the real winner. If you've noticed, this movie has a lot of Sylvester in it, pretty much mirroring his life in the film world. And when I say he poured himself into the character, it's because in one scene he drew from his own life to add the emotion it needed. I'm talking about when he calls out his trainer for not being there when he needed him years ago, saying, "I needed you 10 years ago, and you weren't there when I needed you." Sylvester later said that in that moment, he felt like he was speaking through Rocky to his own dad. Finally, the premiere day arrives, the most important moment of his life. The movie screens at the New York theater where he used to work, dreaming of one day being on the big screen. Now that dream is within reach, but if something goes wrong, Hollywood's doors could shut forever. He recalls standing behind the audience to gauge their reactions, and when the most thrilling moment hits, when Rocky knocks down his opponent, the whole theater rises, cheering the punch with such intense energy it felt like they were all in the fight. That moment marked a before and after for Sylvester. It was when his hard work stopped going unnoticed, and the movie became a massive hit. Rocky quickly topped the charts in Hollywood, opening many doors for the actor. The impact was so huge that his life changed completely. The film raked in about $160 million at the box office, turning him from someone with almost nothing into a man for whom money was no longer an issue. It earned several major award nominations, including a Golden Globe. But what shocked the world was when it won the Oscar for Best Picture. The room erupted in applause. The producers went up to the stage and called Sylvester to join them. When it was his turn to speak, he simply said, "Thank you to all the Rockies of the world. I love you." But why? How did a movie with such a small budget and a simple story become such a success? For starters, a key factor was that it broke the mold. Up until then, movie leads seemed plucked from a display case. Physically perfect men with unshakable principles, who defeated the villain, got the girl, and embodied the aspirational hero ideal. Then along came Rocky Balboa, a neighborhood guy with no direction, no standout talents, droopy eyes, and a messy life. Holding a regular job, training in a dusty gym, quiet, unsure, someone who took on the world but didn't let it swallow him whole. He had nothing extraordinary, and that's exactly why he felt real. Plus, it's clear Rocky felt so relatable because Stallone wrote him seeing himself in the character. Stallone also came from the bottom. He grew up with a violent dad, a facial paralysis that marked his face forever, constant rejections from producers saying he didn't fit the part, that his voice didn't work, that his face wasn't right, and that he had to sell his dog to eat. He was someone who failed and got knocked down by life. But like Rocky, he fought back, and when he finally got his script made into a movie, he fought to star in it. They offered him a sum that would have solved his life's problems, but he refused because he knew that story only made sense if he told it, because deep down, it was his life dressed up as a boxing tale. That, to me, made his Oscar speech words even more poetic. "Thank you to all the Rockies of the world, I love you." He said it because he knew there were millions like him. Ordinary men with regular jobs and real problems. Guys who wake up early, endure, and fail, but keep trying. Who don't make the news but every day, in their own way, get up to fight. That story was for them, and that's why it feels timeless. And by fighting back, I don't just mean keeping at it. There are other ways too, but we'll discover those later in his life. Now, Sylvester has respect, recognition, and for the first time, the chance to choose his projects. One of them is F.I.S.T, a symbol of strength, where he plays Johnny Kovac, a laborer who joins a union and eventually becomes its leader, showing how power can blur anyone's ideals. The problem? The movie doesn't fully click with audiences or critics, marking the start of a new phase in his life. On one hand, he's got more stability, and his wife is pregnant again, which should fill him with joy. But along with that happiness comes the pressure of public expectations, now demanding he repeat Rocky's success. That weight starts to feel heavier than he imagined, straining his peace of mind and his relationship with Sasha. With that pressure on his shoulders, Sylvester decides to write again, but this time he steps up to direct and star in his own movie, Paradise Alley. The story follows three brothers growing up in Hell's Kitchen, the neighborhood where he was born in the 1940s, showing how one gets into pro wrestling, but critics tear it apart, questioning his direction, acting, and writing skills. Since he was in charge of everything, the blow feels personal. In a written interview with Roger Ebert, Stallone reveals the original cut was much longer and deeper, but Universal Pictures trimmed it to make it punchier. Facing that, Sylvester refuses to give up and instead doubles down with Rocky II's sequel. His goal is to repeat the triumph. Though he knows it's a risk, sequels often disappoint, and many advise against it. Still, he picks up the story. Rocky leaves the hospital with Adrian, gets married, buys a modest house, and they prepare to start a family when she gets pregnant. He tries to step away from boxing and find work, but nothing pans out, and debts keep piling up. Meanwhile, Apollo Creed faces criticism questioning his win, so he publicly challenges Rocky to a rematch. Rocky's torn between returning to the ring or keeping his promise to be a family man. The story mirrors his own life, giving the character a humanity anyone can connect with. During filming, he's all in on production. His commitment is total, but it takes a toll. He's with his family, but his mind stays on the movie, completely absorbed by the work. In 1979, Rocky II hits theaters, a pivotal moment in his career that will determine if his first success was a fluke or the start of something big. And against all odds, the sequel becomes his second major hit, doubling the original's box office and proving sequels can work. Amid that success, his second son, Sergio, is born, giving him a new push to keep going. But behind Hollywood's lights, Sylvester feels a deep void. In an interview, he admits that after achieving his dream and proving his worth, he doesn't know what's next or what his purpose is. As things settle, he takes on new roles while searching for direction. He acts in Victory, playing a prisoner of war plotting an escape during a soccer match against a Nazi team, and later in Nighthawks as an undercover cop chasing a terrorist. In the original script for the latter, his character died, but Stallone fought that creative choice and fortunately saved him. Though these films don't match his biggest successes, they keep him active, and maybe that's just what he needs, because personally, he faces two tough blows. Over time, his relationship with Sasha, who'd been with him from the start, falls apart, and they separate. Plus, when his youngest son is nearly 3, he's diagnosed with autism, which Sylvester describes as a hard hit upon learning the limitations his son would face. Since then, his family life grows more complex, with calm moments interrupted by crises that shake everything. Amid all this, a project emerges that feels like a personal outlet. Around the same time he's working on Rocky III, he's offered a lead in Rambo, an action movie based on David Morrell's novel First Blood, with a solid story and big potential. If you haven't seen it, here's a quick rundown. It follows an ex-soldier struggling to adjust to civilian life as he travels across the U.S. On one trip, he reaches Hope, a mountain town in Washington, where he clashes with the sheriff, a Korean War vet who arrests him. At the station, Rambo is beaten and forced to shower, triggering memories of his time as a prisoner of war. When they try to shave him, he snaps, takes down the officers, steals a motorcycle, and flees to the mountains. The police can't catch him, as Rambo masters guerrilla tactics. The sheriff calls in military backup, but Troutman, his former officer, warns against treating him like a regular criminal. He knows what Rambo endured and what he's capable of when cornered. During filming, Sylvester dives deep into the role, talking to veterans, drawing inspiration from his dad, also an ex-military man, and crafts Rambo as tough on the outside but broken within. He trains hard for the combat scenes and decides Rambo should speak as little as possible. He wanted everything conveyed through looks and body language to portray a man utterly alone, carrying what he can no longer say. As a fun and important note, when Sylvester learned the original ending had Rambo dying, he walked off set, breaching his contract. He knew he was breaking it, but it bothered him so much he didn't care. He only returned after they agreed to change the ending and let Rambo live. Thankfully for Sylvester, the story became a huge success. It placed him at the top of the action genre, where he finally fit and found his niche. Entering this world sparked a rivalry with Arnold Schwarzenegger. Though they competed for roles and box office dominance, they respected each other, and that push drove them to outdo themselves. Sylvester rode that momentum to release Rocky IV with the same emotional tone, but more spectacle and patriotism, and Rambo II, a more explosive, action-heavy sequel. Both were box office hits, taking him to the peak of his commercial career. Though Rocky and Rambo cemented him as a cinema icon, he also sought to branch out with other films. He starred in Over the Top, a blend of family drama and arm wrestling that went unnoticed at release, but later became a cult classic. Later, He teamed up with Kurt Russell for Tango and Cash, which did well at the box office despite production issues. After years of on-screen explosions and chases, Sylvester began diversifying his life beyond movies. He formed a polo team so he and his dad could compete, facing off with their respective squads. This effort took them to major venues, including the Wellington Field, considered the world's most prestigious. But his dad remained troubled, and during a match covered by the media, Frank struck again. He hit his son from behind with such force that it knocked him off his horse, all caught on video. After the match, a press conference followed where Sylvester took the mic and said, "If you noticed, the first low blow, and only low blow, of the game was delivered by a father to his son." That moment drew a line. From then on, he decided to cut ties completely. He sold the horses, the team, the truck, and everything tied to that world. That kind of relationship can affect anyone. But maybe it's exactly what motivated Sylvester to write his own story as a father. After all he'd been through, he set out to create the fifth Rocky movie. In this installment, he's not the sole focus, as he wrote a role specifically for his eldest son, Sage, including him in the film. He released Cliffhanger, an action flick with spectacular mountain scenes, then Demolition Man, a tense thriller, Judge Dredd, a dark comic book adaptation, and Assassins, another suspense thriller. One of his best roles came with Copland, where he played a sheriff in a small town, showcasing a more human, relatable side. Critics praised it, highlighting his ability to take on complex characters different from his usual roles. Personally, he found stability, marrying Jennifer Flavin and building a family with 3 daughters. However, as the 2000s rolled in, his career hit a rough patch. His projects no longer stood out or generated the same impact, so he decided to play his 2 trump cards, Rocky and Rambo. In 2006, he returned with Rocky Balboa, the 6th installment of his most personal saga. In this film, Rocky is a former heavyweight champ who's been out of boxing for 20 years. He's still in the same old neighborhood, running a restaurant named after Adrian, the great love of his life, who passed away. His relationship with his son is strained, as the kid struggles with living in his dad's shadow and the weight of his last name. In one key scene, when his son confronts him and asks him not to expose himself to the media like that, there's a crucial conversation where it feels like Sylvester, through Rocky, is leaving a message for his son and a reminder for himself. The world ain't all sunshine and rainbows. It's a mean, nasty place. And no matter how tough you are, it'll beat you to your knees and keep you there if you let it. Neither you, nor me, nor anybody hits as hard as life. But it ain't about how hard you hit. It's about how hard you can get hit and keep moving forward. That's how you win. If you know what you're worth, go out and get what you're worth. But you gotta be willing to take the hits and not point fingers, saying, "I ain't where I want to be because of him or her or anybody." Cowards do that, and you ain't a coward. You're better than that, son. Soon after, he released Rambo 4 and in 2010, The Expendables. But amid all this, another significant personal moment unfolded. Sylvester publicly shared images of visiting his father in his final days. Frank was on his deathbed when he said something that left him thinking. "You know, you should learn to love and forgive people," he said weakly. With a mix of irony and pain, Sylvester replied, "You just figured that out now when the damn angels are about to whisper in your ear like you've had an epiphany." His father simply nodded and said, "Yeah, I had one." And the following year, something even worse happened. His eldest son, Sage, passed away suddenly at 36. He was an actor, director, and had founded his own independent production company, all with his dad's support and love. He was married, had projects in the works, and a life ahead of him. The official cause was a heart attack from an undiagnosed coronary disease. The news shook the world and left Sylvester completely devastated. I think though Sage had a short life, it was surely, in part thanks to his father, a better life than the one Sylvester had. Giving him that life, to me, is another way of fighting back. It's not just about enduring, persisting, or getting up again and again. Sometimes fighting back means choosing to be different from how life treated you, breaking the cycle, and giving something better than what you received. Sylvester's dad marked him with violence, absence, and humiliations that were never fully resolved. Yet when it was his turn to be a father, he chose a different path. He supported Sage in his dreams, worked with him, stood by his career, gave him space, backing, and love, things his own father couldn't do for him. That's also a form of resistance, one that can change entire generations. Even with that pain, he pressed on with his career. In 2014, he released The Expendables 3, and a year later, he returned to the Rocky universe with Creed, where he's no longer the lead but the mentor to the new boxer, Adonis, Apollo Creed's son. The performance moved critics and audiences alike, earning him a Golden Globe for Best Supporting Actor and an Oscar nomination, something he hadn't seen since the first Rocky. It's a recognition not just of the character, but of his entire career journey. In 2018, he came back with Creed 2, and the next year, he launched Rambo: Last Blood, which, at least so far, is the last installment of the war veteran saga. After that, Sylvester started expanding his presence into other formats and genres. He joined Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 2 and later Volume 3, playing Stakar, a minor but symbolically significant character. In the Suicide Squad, he voiced King Shark, a role that surprised fans with its difference and humor. Currently, Sylvester Stallone stays active across multiple areas. Beyond acting, he's into art, painting, collecting, and offering some of his works at charity auctions. His public image isn't just built on screen, it's also shaped by his commitment to social causes and generous gestures. His net worth exceeds $400 million, but what truly defines him is his capacity for effort, transformation, and resilience in the face of challenges. He became a symbol of perseverance both on and off the screen. Throughout his career, Sylvester portrayed many tough, muscular guys who took on enemies bigger than themselves. But what set them apart wasn't their strength, it was their heart. They were characters who knew pain and scars, but still had the ability to love and care. Especially Rocky, a character who reminded us you can be strong without being cruel and resilient without turning to stone. More than once, Sylvester refused to let his characters die, even when the script symbolically demanded it. And that says a lot about him. Maybe he feared that idea because, deep down, that boxer who fought, that soldier who tried, or that prisoner seeking escape were stories trying to say this couldn't end here. He still had more to give. A life philosophy he captured perfectly in that final speech, reminding his son, himself, and all of us that nobody hits as hard as life. But it's not about how hard you hit. It's about how hard you can get hit and keep moving forward, because that's how you win, not letting life's blows define you, but choosing what to do after you take them.